All right, welcome back. We are Game 3004 in the winter 2021 semester, and it's week 4, part 3 of our broadcast. And we're really talking about, we're going to start talking about materials and textures in Blender. And I'm just going to grab that link and put it up on Blackboard. Let's do that. See if it's available for us. Sometimes it's not until the time that I set up. So I'm just going to go into YouTube video. It may not be available yet, but that's not the YouTube link, of course. It's this one. And let's see if that's available. It is. That's nice. And there we go. So that is, if you want to watch it online, that is Materials and Textures in Blender. That's week 4, part 3. All right, so let's move into Blender. I've got Unity up, showing a little example between class and now about our little endless runner dude. And we're not going to handle this till later on, but we're going to get there, right? So let's just save the scene and we'll kind of exit out of this. And let's bring up Blender. All right, so, okay, Blender. Last week, what we did in Blender was we created a tile, and what we did is we spread it out and made it into a plane, or the plane. And from the plane, we created a kind of a faux-looking tile environment that we were able to apply and move it into Unity. And this week, we're going to be talking about materials and texturing, which is what I want to go into next. First thing first, when we're in Blender, you see a couple of objects here. We have a light and we have a camera. They're a little bit bothersome and I don't want to see them right now. So I'm just going to turn them off. You can do that by going into the inspector here and turning the light off, turning the camera off, and we can leave them in the scene because we might need them later. But we can see here that we're starting off with a cube. What I want to do first with the cube is I want to make this into a pillar. So let's rename the cube into pillar, because that's what we want, a three-dimensional pillar for this example. I want to stretch the pillar so that it is at least 2.5 times tall. So again, a couple ways to do that. You can use the scale tool, and we can just do it by eye. And you can actually look, when you're scaling, there is a number that will appear on the top left corner, which will show you the scale. So for example, if I want to go 2.5 times tall, I could totally do that, or whatever. That's the scale, the global scale, right? Or numerically, if I pull up the numeric transform, then I can just type in 2.5 in there. So that's what I really want. Which means that the dimensions on the z-axis, which is another way to do it, is 5 meters. Okay, so not too big. So that is the first step. The first step is scaling this up so that it is, 5 meters tall. I want to also move this, the object, by using the numeric transform. Again, you can find this. There's a little arrow on the right-hand side here. You can kind of pop this open, and what you can do, or you can press the N key, which toggles it on and off. What you can do is you can move this 2.5 meters to the to the floor of the object, or the world. And to do that, I can just go to location on the z-axis and just type in 2.5, which moves it right up here. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. I want to apply the changes right away so we don't have to think about it later. I almost forgot today in the first lab. So again, there's a couple ways to do that. You can search for apply and apply all transforms, or press Control A. Control A will allow you to apply all transformations. And when we do that, you can see that the z-axis has been zeroed out. It's 1, as well as the only thing that's changed is the dimensions, but even the location, that is now the new 0, 0, 0 point, okay? Which is where we want to start. All right, so that is starting off. We have our pillar, and what I want to do now is, the next step is I want to texture it and those kind of things. Now, I'm going to be using a site that I think is great. It's called textures.com. And if you go up to textures.com, you should sign up. It's free. But let's suppose I go to the site. It'll look like this, right? And if I go to browse library, again, textures.com is what I'm recommending, right? If I go to browse library, I can search for wall textures, right? And again, please, I recommend signing up for free. You'll probably need it throughout the semester. You can choose any texture you want, something that makes sense for you. And these are samples of what the textures look like. Notice it says 16K plus because there are versions of the texture that are 16K, not just 4K or 8K. Really cool stuff. They've got great objects here and tons of examples. If you look through, some that are more rocky than others, some that are smoother than others. We're going to use something that looks a little bit like this, Stonewall. And instead of you downloading, if you click on the Stonewall texture, you can see that this is the final result. This is what it could look like. And we have several textures to make up the Stonewall. We have a texture for albedo, another one for displacement, normal map, roughness, and ambient occlusion. Those are all the different textures we can use to combine to create our effect that we want. But we're going to do it on a very simple pillar, right? The pillar has like no geometry. It's literally just like, we've got different faces, and we've just stretched basically a cube to make it really high. So that's it. There's nothing. It's completely smooth. But we're going to make it look like something like this, right? And again, you guys should have learned about texture mapping from OpenGL, your OpenGL course, but we're going to do a little bit of a review now. All right, so instead of you downloading this stuff on your own, what I've done is I've taken the liberty of putting up this, the textures for educational purposes up on Blackboard. So if you look at Blackboard, if you go into textures, then you can see that there are all the textures that is that not there? Except for the main one. I don't know why I didn't put that one in there, but no, it says the selected file is textures.com albedo. It should actually have all of them. Hopefully you can get all of them. If not, I'll just put this together again. But these are all the different textures that you'll have access to that you'll need for this example. All right, so instead of you wasting your credits, on textures.com, so if you go to textures.com, you get some credits. And for the week or for the day, I've got, let's say, 11 free. You'll get different credits every week. And so if you're not a professional and you just want to use some of these, you can do that. Can you also use textures from other places? Yes, you can. But the thing that I want to mention is that these a lot of times are tileable, and they're great little textures. There's a ton of different options that they have here that you can explore. And I think it's a great little site that you can go to. All right, so now that we have our access to our textures, then what I want to do is load them in. We have to load them in. And we're going to do it one at a time. But before that, I want to check to see, here's my checkpoint for you guys. Do you have, your pillar? Are you there with me? And do you have you downloaded the textures from Blackboard? Let's see if you have. If you have, check mark. If you haven't, X. This is on our stuff here. So hopefully you guys are following along. I got one person that did it. Are there any other people that are going to follow along with me today? So again, all I want you to do is just change your cube into a pillar, and then hopefully you'll be able to do this little exercise with me. Thank you, Michael. Anyone else? All right, we're ready to do our texture adventure. That's how it's going to be now. Michael says, any specific folder to download them to? Not yet. Sorry about that, Kat. Okay, well, it's recorded too, so this is pretty cool. So now let's take a look. So I've got this pillar. Thank you, Michael and Russ. What I'm going to do here is I want to do a couple things. One is I want to apply the textures on this thing, and there's a couple tabs up here to help us out, okay? So one is we have a material. The material is applied to this, this polygon, and it's applied to the polygon by default because remember we took our standard cube, which has a standard material, and we kind of expanded it, right? If we didn't, we'd have to create a material. Think about the material as a container, or where the shader kind of connects. And this is the shader that we're using, a principled BSDF shader that's connecting to the material that's kind of connected to in a code block, a data block, to this particular object. We need to add textures as well. And so notice that while the material is selected, we need to go to the texture tab on the right, and we need to load or create a new texture slot. So let's do that by clicking new. And notice our texture slot, it just says texture. Let's rename that to Stonewall. That's our Stonewall texture that we're going to make now. We're going to load. And notice on the right down here, there is something called open. So new and open. We're going to click open. And we're going to select the texture that I've given you. Hopefully you put it in a place that you can access it. I have them all in a row. Here's albedo, the first one. That's the first one I want you to load, the albedo one, which is really the diffuse texture. And this is a sample of what it's going to look like. Okay, immediately when you load the texture sample, what I want you to do is click on this little button, which is pack the image. We're going to pack all the images like this later on, but make sure you click on pack image. And this is going to retain the settings for the image that we just loaded. Notice that over here, no change. Why? Even though we've loaded the texture, we haven't applied it in any way to this object. Okay. Also, the material is called material. Let's rename this to pillar. So we know it's the pillar material. Okay, we're going to use this. We're using a principled BSDF, so a physically based rendering or PBR type texture with a principled volume. That's what this is, right? That we talked about before. Okay. There's some options here. Each of these properties are available. Each of them is something that can be clickable and modifiable, right? As an example, they have many properties here, right? Blair asks, can't you just create the material in Unity? It has slots for albedo, etc. Yes, but we want to set it up here in Blender first. Okay. So, and Unity has basics, Blender has more, and Substance has even more, right? So we can talk about how to use this. You view this thing. Unity hasn't caught up with texturing, not like Unreal. I have to be honest. Unreal has a lot more details that you can use. Anyways, let's go into a couple of slots or tabs on the top. So layout is what we normally are used to. There's also something called modeling, which is just a quick way of getting into edit mode. There is sculpting, where we can do voxel sculpting on an object, where I can physically sculpt an object to surface. Now, in order for me to do that with Blender, I'd have to have this object subdivided many more times, thousands of times, to give me enough geometry so I can sculpt. All right, I'm not going to do that here, but let's continue. UV editing is where we're going to go into next, and there's my UV map, right, as an example, and this is my model, right? We're going to get into this in a second, but before we do, I want to kind of preview the rest. Texture paint is where I can paint a texture directly. I can create a texture live here on a model, right? And I can choose brushes. I have all kinds of things I can do. I can create a texture, and I can actually paint my texture by myself. Shading is where I want to go, and this is where I want to take a look at the principled BSDF material, and the material output is right here. Notice that what I have is this is visual coding for the shader, and I have my shader, kind of the object here, and my output, this green output, connects to the surface. Remember that there's three components: surface, volume, and displacement. This connects to the surface, so it's a surface shader is what I'm making. So one of the ways you can add a texture is you can add a texture node. So I can go Shift A would allow me to add stuff just like it would in when I'm adding a model, or I can go to Add, and I can go to Search, and I can type in texture, and I can look at, there's something called image texture. So here's my image texture node, and notice that the color of the color output is yellow. So is the color on the base color input. Output, input, they should match as much as possible. And if I drag a line between the color output and the color input, now I have a connection. What I want to do is at the top, And this is just a preview of what my model will look like when the texture is applied. I definitely need to be on this link, this little object. There's this one which is fully rendered, and there's with lights, and this one where there's everything is unlit. I want to go into this one right here. This one. Now, instead of loading or opening up a texture, I can go into here where I've already loaded it and select my textures.com albedo. And when I do, you're going to see that it appears here inside of my my preview. So this is definitely one way of doing it. Now, if you're not comfortable with using something like nodes, and by the way, we're going to use nodes with shader graph in Unity later on this semester, as well as with VFX graph in Unity later on this semester, then you're going to see this visual coding language that we're going to use something like this. And by the way, like we saw when I did my lecture earlier, that programs like Substance Designer and other programs, again, same thing with Unreal, they all use some kind of visual coding language when it comes to creating your code. Sometimes for Unreal, as an example, Unreal does everything with visual coding for the most part, all their blueprints, and you can add C++ scripting along the way as well. So you should not be unfamiliar with visual coding. I'm just going to delete this object right now, and then do it from your layout and show you the difference. If I can do it here like this and get a preview, or if I delete it and go back to layout, how do I do it on this side? I want to scroll down to scroll over to where I see the base color, click on the little yellow button again, and it gives me the option of using a image texture, just like we did before, right? So here's my image texture. I don't want to open one. I already have it, and I can just use the texture that I loaded, which the reason why it doesn't show up here is because I need to make sure that the viewport shading model is this one. Now I can see my texture. Okay, are you with me? You see your texture that's here. Hopefully you can see your texture. Again, steps. I loaded the texture first. First, I downloaded it from textures.com or somewhere else. I loaded it inside the texture slot right here, right, as an example. I called it Stonewall, which is what I did here. And then what I did was I connected it to my material by clicking on the base color node, which is right here, and then selecting image texture. Once I select image texture, then I can select the image texture right here with this little selector, as opposed to making a new one or opening up another one, okay? So just Nate so far. Anyone else with me? Do I need to do something again? Are you guys good? All right. Thank you, Russ. Michael, how are you doing? Add it in the shading view, but don't see it in the layout view. All right. So again, in the layout view, you go on your material, right? And then on the right, you're going to see base color. Click on the base color little yellow circle there, right? That looks like, click onto it. You'll see that there's image texture. And when you click on image texture, it'll come up with an option where you can select the texture that you want to apply. That's all you're doing. It still gets gray. Yeah, so you don't want, make sure that it's principled BSTF. So make sure it doesn't look like this. You need to use nodes, and it looks like this. And albedo looks gray? That's weird. You may want to try and download it again from textures.com if it looks weird. How do I use nodes? So you get nodes on the top. So if you go to shading, then what you can see is exactly what I did before. You have, so let's remove the node again. So I would go to, I'm in shading, and I click add, and I click, if I search for texture, and if I go to image texture, it'll bring it up. And then I just connect the yellow dot to the other yellow dot in base color, and we're good to go. All right, that's how it should be. But we have to select the texture here in this little button. Hopefully you guys are with me. All right, so this is a problem, and I'll wait till Michael connects. But Michael, are you there? Yeah.
Yeah, so I have the node, I have it connected, I can see it in the shading. When I head back to layout,
Oh, you can't see it. Yeah, because up here on the right, you have to change the viewport shading mode. So if I go back to layout, and if I go back here, this has to be clicked. Viewport shading. Otherwise, you'll see this.
Okay, that's the one I meant.
This just shows you, this is unlit. This is an unlit view, right, of the model. So unlit means there's no lighting model applied. If I click this one, because I've turned off my lights, then you can't see the lighting at all. But if I turn on my lights, you can see how the lighting would affect the model.
Okay.
So that's why I want to go with this one, unlit. All right, so now that you're all with me, or whoever's watching me is with me, thank you. What we want to do is I want to address the UV map, because this is wrong, right? It's wrong because the way it's been unwrapped, okay? And the fact that I've elongated it, stretched it, and all this kind of stuff. So let's talk about UV mapping now. Let's go back into UV editing on the top. UV editing, I want you to scroll out, because you can scroll and select on either side. Now notice if I move my mouse, if I'm this side, I'm controlling this view. If I'm on this side, I'm controlling this view. Let's move into the right shading model for the viewport, so I can see the shader on here again as well. Okay. And we can see that this is a problem. The top looks okay. Top, no problem. This is, if I select a face, and I can do that by going to face select mode here. If I select the top face, it shows you which part of the texture that I'm sampling from. So example, if I look at the model, like how this is looking at the model, it's actually looking at the model like this, okay, where this is X and Y, okay? And notice the top left corner here of the top, right, the top face is sampling from this part right here in the texture. It's going right there. So 1-to-1, it's sampling from this little area right here. And this thing that we're seeing when the face is selected is an island. That's what we call it, right? A texture island. I can move the texture island around anywhere I want. So for example, if I use some kind of selection, I can use box select mode, which is B for me. And I can select just the vertices of the face that's been selected. And then I can use the move tool just like normal. And when I move it, it actually samples from a different region of my texture, right? So again, if I want the top to have a big block like this or something that looks like this, I can sample from different places in my on the map. But the problem that I have is this. This is really skewed because I have this shape, but it's been unwrapped with a square. That means that it's not 1-to-1 anymore. I have an object that this is the top left corner, and you can see that it's been stretched. It's been stretched. And also it looks like the object is upside down, right? So compared to the top, okay? So how then, if I was to select all the faces on this side, so if I go select all, you can see that I've moved my island. I can move my island to, and I can select my island anywhere I like. I can move it anywhere I want to sample from, right? And I can use the controls on the top face, and I can do it for each of the faces. So I can say, well, I want to move that island around, so I can select those faces and move that around, right? But my challenge is it's not the right size. I could try and make it the right size, but it's going to be by eye more than anything else, right? So I need to unwrap this thing. I need to unwrap my model. And so, and in order for me to do unwrapping, notice there is UV on the top right corner. Again, this only appears here in this view. If I go to UV, first of all, let me select all my faces, select all. And if I go UV unwrap, then it does nothing, because that's what's been done already. I've already unwrapped. If I go to UV, Smart UV Project, right, and it has some parameters, and if I click OK, it does something that looks like this, which isn't terrible. actually did a lot of work for me. All right, Smart UV Project. And again, I had everything selected, and a lot of times Smart UV Project is going to create the faces. Now notice these faces are now you know, kind of proportionate, but the top and the bottom are in the wrong spots, but it doesn't really matter because the top and the bottom probably will never match. Now, sometimes when I do, you know, Smart UV Project, let's try it again. So I'll select all, and then I'll unwrap and unwrap. It will give me something totally different. Let's try a different unwrapping, like a cube projection. It's going to actually try and layer things on top of each other, which is kind of wrong, right? That's a cube projection, right? Yours might even look different than mine. And if I go UV unwrap or UV, you know, again, if I go to something like cylinder projection, it'll look completely wacky, right? So there's different kinds of projections you can use. And then what's going to happen is you can see that the texture that appears on the object is totally whack. So if I select a vertex, I can move each vertex around to skew what the texture that you're looking at, so that it makes more sense by moving it around the map. But again, this isn't very efficient. I'd rather do what I did earlier. So again, I want to select all, UV, and if I do Smart UV Project, and if I'm lucky, I'm going to get the right thing. If I'm not lucky, it's going to be bad. So another way to do it, especially when you don't have just one object, and I have what we had last week, which was I had many faces, tons and tons of them. In fact, I had like a ton of faces with my tile, right? So what I want to do there instead is I can use other techniques, and one of the techniques I can use is I can unwrap by my view, right? So there's another one that says I want to project from view. And if I do that, you can see that literally whatever I see here is how it's being projected here, but it is skewed because my view is in perspective mode. So what I want to do is move into orthographic mode. So if I click on the one of these axes, for example, the Y, then it snaps me into orthographic mode. And you can see that here I'm looking at the back orthographic face. Let's move so that I can at least see the front. And I want to select the front only. That's the front. Notice how it's skewed. Let's bring this closer. Let's go back into orthographic mode. Again, you can go into orthographic mode and the front by pressing the 1 on the number pad, right? Or if you go to view, right, as an example, under view, you can see that I can look at under viewport, I can specifically choose front, back, bottom, top, and you can see the hotkey for that right here. Okay. So again, front, right. If I want to go to the back, then I can press Control and 1. That's the back. Control and 3 goes to the left. 7 is the top, and Control 7 is the bottom. All right. So those are the keys. You can also click the little gizmo on the right, which will also do the same things. Okay. But what I want, guys, is let's make this something that is centered in the screen. Select a scroll of view, an area that you want to see, some kind of size, and whatever you do not scroll in or change your zoom level at this point. This is another way to do it. So what I can do is I can select my front face like this. Again, I'm in face select mode to do that up here. And then what I can do is I can unwrap. So only my front face is selected. I can unwrap and I can choose project from view, which is this one. When I do, I've got this new island that comes up. Okay. So again, you can do Smart UV Project, which does a lot of it for us a lot of times, but sometimes it doesn't. And what we want is to use this island. Now this island appears in the middle, and this is the front. So what I'm going to do is I can select this island on the left-hand side here, where I, just like normal, I can just select and move it over. Let's move it over to the side. So I don't want it to be in the way of the other islands I want to access. In fact, let's just put it off screen a little bit like this. Remember that, don't worry about it being off screen, because this is a repeatable texture that repeats everywhere. Here, 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 everywhere. Okay. Next, let's go into the right side. I'm just going to go from one side to the other, right, back, and then left. Okay. So we're going to just choose right. I'm going to choose that face. Notice that that is skewed. UV. I'm going to go to project from view, and now I have that face. Select it all, and then move that over slightly to the left, just so you make room for the other ones. All right, I'm going to go to the back. Again, you can press the buttons to do that. Notice it tells you what side it is over here. Right click or click to select your, however you select your object, right? As an example. Yeah, you have to kind of make it a lot bigger, Michael, like this big. If it's small, then it's going to appear small. You have to, whatever you see here is how proportionate it is over here. Okay, so you have to kind of zoom in to see it. But keep it at that zoom level like I have. Don't modify the zoom level. All right, so now I want to do the same thing, UV. I want to, again, project from view. I get that one. I can select it and move that island a little bit to the right. So I got left, front, right, back, and then left is going to be over here. So again, I'm going to go to left. I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to go UV, project from view, and then I'm going to take this island and move it way on the right. Right? So you have those three. Let's do the top and the bottom, and then we're done. So top, right, skewed, UV, project from view. I'm going to take this object, move it to the top somewhere as an example. And then I want to do the bottom. I want to select it. I want to go UV. I want to do project from view, and then select it on this side and pull it toward the bottom. And then let's look at the entire thing. So select all, and you can see that this is what I got going on. Okay, they're all separate, and I want to put them together. And again, this is just one strategy. The other way was Smart UV Project, right? But sometimes you need to do this. I'm showing you this because there might be a complex thing. We need to be able to do it per side, and this gives us a little bit more control. A lot longer to do it this way, but more control. One thing that I note is if I deselect all, I can select all or deselect all on this side because I have selection criteria here as well as selection over here. Here I'm not touching this side. I'm over here on this side. There's two different viewports. Selection on this side has nothing to do with selection really on this side, right? Well, it does. Whatever you select here appears here. But here, once you've selected everything here and I've kept everything selected, then you can actually select and move your islands around on this side. Okay, so I want to deselect all over here. So select none on this side. I want to take these verts. I can select each vertex because I want to move this island away from this one so they're not overlapping. And then let's correct these ones. I'm just going to do it by eye. So I'm just going to move around my texture, just like we have the same move controls that we used to move this. I'm not touching this side. And I want to select this texture. So I'm just going to select this texture island right here. And I want to move it closer so that it's as close as I can get it to by eye. Okay. Again, if you zoom in, you can see that if it's not close enough, like if it's apart like this, you can press G, which is move across the X-axis, and you can move it as close as you want. I'm doing this by eye because it's going to basically just overlap at the line. There is a snapping option. I just don't remember it, Russell. There is snapping. Sorry about that. And then I can do the same thing with the same things. Take the next island, move it closer. It can be very close. Like you can see that if I go, I can zoom right in, press G for move, X, I can constrain it across the X-axis only, and then I can move it right on top of the other one. So the lines kind of intersect. It's pretty close. Like you won't be able to see the difference. And I did the same thing in the morning class and it turned out great. Again, the same thing. First of all, let's deselect all, go back, select the last island, and bring it closer as much as possible so I can see it kind of overlapping. but just at the line, at the edge. And if I scroll in again, I can use G for move, X across the X-axis to constrain it, and I can move it so that it's right on top. So there I've got all each one of the islands for my walls, and they've been set up. Let's put the top and the bottom over here too, but you're going to notice it doesn't matter where the top and bottom are. Really, it doesn't matter, because now I can move this around. It doesn't matter because you're never going to align the top with the bottom because of the way the bricks are. The bricks aren't really, this texture is not made for that. In fact, maybe in reality, I probably have a different texture for the top and the bottom altogether, right? So what we want to do is, let's just move it closer. So I'm just going to deselect all, go there, select this texture here. And again, you can get pretty close for us, so don't worry. Again, what you want to do is you want to move this close as possible. Again, you can use this as a constraint and bring this in so that it just barely overlaps. Again, you don't care for the top and the bottom so much, but I'm just doing it for completeness. And again, I'm just moving these islands around until they are as close to the other texture islands as I can get them without snapping. There we go. Good enough. So now that I have this, you should have this too. If I select all, then this shows you what the texture looks like. And you can see now that it's nice continuity between one side and the other. That's what we want. That's why I did this. And they're proportional. Okay, I'm going to ask the question now. Are you with me? Are you here at this point? And you could have got here in different ways. You could have got here by Smart UV Project. You could have got here by doing what I just did. Michael, I see you coming in. Are you okay? Sort of guess. Yes. Okay. What I want to do is, this is way too big. These cobblestone blocks, or these stone blocks, are way too big. So what I can do is, now that I have this side selected, I can scale this side out. There's two ways to do it. I could use the scale button, but I find it's better just to use the shortcut key for scaling. And if I scale it out, you can see that what I want to do is most likely scale it so that, and I can move it as well, so that I can, at least each of these islands is as tall as my texture, right? So again, I can scale it out and I can move it down and I can move it across. So at least I hug one side, of my texture to the actual, or one side of my islands, all the islands to the textures as close as you can. And what this does is it creates the right sizing for the texture versus the islands. You can make this bigger, by the way. If I scale it up even more, then these bricks will become smaller. All right, so cool. This is first step. First step is we unwrapped. We use different unwrapping strategies, right? As an example, we moved our islands around. In this case, that's how I did it. And now, you know what, guys? I'm a nervous guy. I don't like when I'm using Blender, because sometimes when I'm using Blender, it crashes because it's a program that's open source. It's not like you can, even professional programs crash. Let's make sure we save. So I'm going to say File, and I'm going to save, and it's going to ask me where I want to save it. As an example, I'm just going to save this as pillar.blend. I already have a pillar.blend in my downloads, and it's just going to overwrite this pillar.blend. So save. And if it will override what I had before. It's not a big deal. All right, so that is the first step. The first step is getting it so that you see the texture, and it's unwrapped and it's in the right spot. Great. So now if you have this, let's add normal maps, and let's add the other stuff that I got you to download. Again, for all that stuff, for normal maps and those things, I also downloaded them, and they're up on Blackboard. So you can see that there's normal maps, there's roughness, displacement, and ambient occlusion. Let's grab these ones as well and apply them to my shader. So going back to this, I could do it here in the normal map. So here in normal map, where it says normal, let's just do it here in the layout view. I'm going to click normal, and then what I want for this one is I want a normal map, but the normal map that I'm going to use is going to be something that I load in the color. So I created a normal map, right? And then where it says color again in the normal map, I want to click it, and I want to click onto image texture. And for the image texture that I'm going to use for the normal map, I want to load a new texture. So open, I'm going to select that new texture, which is the normal. So there's going to be something that says normal. That's the one I want you to open up. And now that texture is opened and applied, a normal map is applied to this. Now, one thing to note is that it is very, a lot of times we get a lot of shine. And why? Because our strength of the normal, as an example, you can adjust it, right? So here is 0. If I make the strength go up higher, you can see that it becomes really shiny. And we don't want it to be so shiny, especially if it's over 1, right? It becomes a really shiny kind of affair. So I want to move it to something like just a little bit over 0.35, let's say, which creates a good enough effect for normal. If you want it higher than that, like as you approach something that's too high, it almost skews it, like so it looks unnatural and shiny. So I don't want it that much. So again, something like 0.35 is just enough so that you can see a bit of, shape to it. Again, it's not modifying the box. The box is still square or straight, but it's going to give it a little bit of more. What it's going to give it the illusion of depth. All right, that's that part. There's also other options here as well. There's roughness, and for roughness again, you can see that there are options for roughness as well. Roughness, as well as so we can do the same thing here like we did last time. Instead of using a normal, I want to use a roughness. I want to use a color. I want to select a color for roughness as well. So here's color. And there's different ones. There's linear and constant and quadratic. Let's just use linear color, right, for the roughness, right? And so it says light fall off, and that's fine. If I click onto it now, right, again, if that, and by the way, if it's not right and it looks like it's not right, let's just do it on the shader side. So I'll undo, and I'll go back to the shading, and you can see what's happening here, right? I had a normal map that we brought in, for the normal. I'm just going to bring this up so you can see it more. You can zoom in and out like normal. I'll move this around. And again, visual is pretty good. So here's the roughness right here. And I want to bring another texture and bring it into the roughness. So let's do that. So we'll just do Shift A this time and go and do texture. Notice that there's different options. One of them is image texture. Here's my image texture. I want to load or open the roughness. So go back to roughness. There it is. Open the image. And then now drag and drop the color node, actually, even though it's yellow, drag and drop the color node to roughness, right? And then you get your roughness value that appears. What you probably want for the roughness value is some kind of vector that goes between color and roughness. So let's try that again. So what you want to do is you don't want this, directly in there, because you see it's yellow. It's red. It's yellow, and this is green. This is gray. So we need some kind of object in between. Let's add in a vector. So again, if I look at vector, right? Again, it really depends on what you want to do in terms of, if you put a transform in there, then you have X, Y, and Z, right? Notice that the points that I get in here, this would be great as an input, right, to the the roughness texture. So as an input, it can go in here. But I need something that's yellow or gray, right? So I need a conversion or some kind of multiplier or something like that. Let's try mix. So let's see if I can do that. So if there's some kind of mix. So again, search. There's a mix shader, and that's green. So that's also, you can see it's wrong. Like this is a great thing about this. It tells you that it's not mix, right? Or let's try again, Shift A for multiply. Multiply is kind of, you want to combine it somehow, right? But the mix shader is probably the closest you're going to get. But again, let's just try the, can kind of go directly from here to there. You want to have a value, but we can fix this in Unity, on the Unity side. So again, let's just put this on the roughness. Notice how it said 0.4. Maybe it's a float that I need. No, it's fall off. I think it's vector, but it's probably going to be a vector math. Yeah, no. I'll figure it out later. Anyways, that's that. And then what we can do is the same thing for ambient occlusion. They have ambient as well. So AO, as well as other things. So that's how you would add additional points to it. I've added a couple of them here. I've saved the file. I can go back to layout, and you can see that that is maybe my final version. I'm going to bring this into Unity now by saving Blender, closing it down, and opening Unity. I'm going to start with just to get us going out of the Blender hour. I'm going to go back up one to week 4, and under week 4 there is a starter for Blender, for Unity, and the starter for Unity is basically last week's project. So if you have last week's project, you can build it off from there. I'm just going to go to github.com, right, and go to George Brown College and show you the starter. So the starter is actually called Lab 2A. That's the starter that I want you to work with. So I'll do it too. I go to Lab 2A and download the code, right? And we'll download this as a zip. And once it's finished downloading, I want to take this zip. I'm just going to do it off screen here really quickly. I'm going to take this zip file, copy it, and I'm going to go to my desktop where I have GAME3004 and paste it. There it is. And then unzip it. So this is Lab 2A main. Let's call this Lab 2B. That's for you guys. We can delete the zip file now. And let's add Lab 2B to my Unity Hub. So again, I'm going to go to Add, and I'm going to choose Lab 2B and click Select Bold. And then I can start it. So you should be able to get Unity up pretty quick. Yeah, it's fine. It's going to take a second for it to rebuild the library if you download it from the starter that I gave you. So hopefully you were able to follow along. I know that we lost quite a few of you because, again, some people aren't interested in 3D, but I think it's a great exercise to understand how everything works. Okay, here, notice if you ever get a window like this, there's a couple problems. One, the scene isn't loaded. So if I go to the scene and double click on main, then here I am with what? What? Well, that's not what I needed. I have my pillar already somehow.
The starter link on Blackboard takes me to 3B, not 2A. So I don't know if that makes a difference.
That makes a difference.
When I opened the 3B one earlier, when
it should not have it.
It just has what we left off with last week.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want this one, 3B. So let's just, because that's just everything. I don't want to do everything at once. Thank you for that. Let's just delete that and try again. I'll go to 3B and copy it. And that's just easier. And just what I'll do is I'll get rid of the remote and make lab 2B up on GitHub in a second. Thank you for that. And then on our Unity Hub, I'll just go here and remove from the list so we don't have that as an issue. All right, so we'll just change this to, again, GAME3004, week 3B, and we'll modify this to, so it says lab 2B. That's what I wanted. There we go. And let's try that again with Unity Hub. So I'll go to Unity Hub and I'll add lab 2B, select, and then I'll open it. And it should open pretty fast because now I've got my library. But I need to remember when I add stuff that before I populate it on GitHub, I need to remove the remote because it's gonna go to the wrong place. All right, so this is what you should have. It's more like it. And you can see like the gray, stuff that we had last time. Great, let's put in our textures first. This is the first step. So I would bring in my textures first. And I'm gonna do that from our downloads folder. So let's suppose I have them in downloads. Where I have them, I'm just gonna go off screen and grab all those textures. And then bring them in, like so. So that's step one, bring in the textures. And then rename them. So this one should be, let's say, Stonewall, A for albedo or diffuse, right? This one is Stonewall, Ambient Occlusion. This is Stonewall, D for displacement. This is Stonewall, N for normal map. And this is the roughness. Okay, so those are all the different textures that you have that we're going to bring in for our pillar. We need all of them if we're going to try and apply them all. In models, I want to drag and drop my pillar model in there, and I've got that also in my downloads. So I'm just going to drag and drop that in. And just like before, it's going to try and bring in my pillar. For the pillar, before we get going, I want to click on materials. I want to extract my material. Okay, I want to extract my material. So let's do that. It's going to ask me where. I'm going to choose materials folder and select it. It's going to extract the material that's embedded in the model, right? And it's going to bring it in here. Also notice that I forgot to remove my camera and my light. We're going to do that later when we create our prefab. Not a big deal. But inside of my my material now, I have pillar, which is, notice there's nothing that's applied. And I want to move away from standard. Don't use standard as a shader. Let's use Autodesk Interactive. Autodesk Interactive gives us almost everything we need here. So we can go back. First of all, let's lock it. On the top right corner, you can lock the inspector that you're looking at. And we can go back to our textures and we can start pulling them in. So Stonewall, albedo. When I click on normal map and I pull it in, here's a normal map, it's going to say it needs to be fixed. Sure, fix it. Notice it retained the value, 0.35 from Blender. Let's do the same thing for ambient occlusion. So there's something called occlusion there, right? As well as we have a roughness. Let's bring that into roughness, right? There's the roughness for that, as well as anything else that you want in there. Displacement, which is a height map. Let's bring that into height map. Okay, so those are all the different options, and you can see that this is the preview that you're going to see in the scene. That's what the material is going to look like. All right, I haven't applied it to the model yet. Are you with me? Have you done this? Have you made the material called pillar by extracting it from the model and going here? Okay, I got Michael, yes. Maybe Nate and Russ can also say yes. Okay. Russell, you're almost there? Maybe not. All right, let's, you're looking for grid snapping options. I know, we'll find that later. Don't worry. Okay, so, but yes, it'd be nice to know what that is. It's just a command that I can set up in Blender. I just forgot what it is. One thing to note, this is what I was asking you, Russell. If you create a material, you can use something called Enable GPU Instancing. This is great if I have many pillars or many things that I want. It goes on the GPU side. Let's enable it anyway. So we're going to enable GPU instancing here, which is pretty cool. From a performance perspective, you should probably do this all the time for anything that you're going to have. Think about this as a texture manager, that is going to basically be instance. We're going to use the same material throughout the entire, for all the objects that I'm going to attach this material to. It's going to be instance in the GPU, which is good. All right, so let's go to models, and let's drag that pillar into the scene now. Let me undo that change. Sorry. One thing to note, one more thing. We need to apply, let's uncheck this lock mechanism, and I go to the model itself. In the model, I want to apply my, like we did before, generate colliders and generate UV light maps, and then click apply down here. Definitely want that. And then what we do is when we pull the model in, if you made a mistake like I did, and you have an extra lamp and as well as a camera, let us, we did it what we did last time, which you can go to prefab and you can unpack completely. And when you unpack completely, you can get rid of the camera and the light. You can get rid of those two things. And then what you can do is you can pull the pillar out of, there's two pillars, the one that's outside and the one that's inside. Let's pull the one outside out and make sure you get rid of the right one, the one that just has the transform. So if you did what I did. And now let's make this pillar a prefab. So under resources prefabs, let's just pull that in. And we're still good to go. Let's move this model, let's move it up and let's say somewhere on top, right? And notice that it's going to move right here. I'm going to position it at exactly 3 on the y-axis. So it sits on top of this other area here. And we want to be able to look at it in 3D. I'm going to zoom in here. And so you can see what you're seeing. Let's take a look. So not bad. It looks pretty good on the Unity side, right? It's kind of exactly how we textured it on the Blender side, which is a good thing. What we want to do here for this one is, again, if I go to materials and if I go to pillar, we can play with a couple of options. The height map right now is 0.02. And if I increase the height map, take a look at what happens on the left-hand side. It actually changes the geometry a little bit. See that? How it's changing the geometry? Again, you got to be, kind of play with the value so that it does just a little bit of changes. What really makes it better is if I had more geometry in the actual model itself. The more geometry I have, the more it's going to look like I've changed stuff. It doesn't change a lot here because it's just literally like, 8 vertices, as an example. So it's not a lot. Okay, but that's what it can look like. Ambient occlusion isn't really doing us any justice, right? Yeah, you can totally do that. A warping effect. These are all, everything here is available in code for sure. So this is the ambient occlusion. I'm not really getting a lot out of the occlusion from this particular shader, this material that we made, right? Roughness, again, there's no options for roughness because we didn't find a roughness option on the Blender side. Again, whatever we put on the Blender material is usually what transfers here. All right, so that's what, you see that the options are either the same or better. So that's what we're going to get with it. But it's pretty cool. It looks pretty good. It looks like there's more geometry than there actually is. It's an illusion, of course, as you're looking at it from the side. It looks much better than if you were to look than just a pillar that's just a cube that's been stretched, which is really what this is. Okay, let's see what it looks like when we play. So I'm going to go back into the game. And we got some crazy values. One thing we have also is the fact that we have a shadow for our character. Let's take the shadow away. The shadow for the character is under the player body. We don't need the body anymore, so we can stop producing the mesh renderer. Let's like hide the mesh renderer. And we definitely don't need the capsule collider. The capsule collider actually is incorrect. We should just remove it as a component. That might be messing us up. And if I run it now, you can see that I have no, let's just snap it to there. We have no shadow, and I should be able to see what it looks like if I run around. Let's run around here and see. Looks pretty good. I can't jump on this because my jumping value is low. So remember we changed it so that the player's ability to jump is absolute. So height jump is 2. Let's make this 4 as a good example. And then if I do that and go back, then I should be able to jump on top of the block. So I can jump 4 up now. Just don't go too close. There we go. And you can see that that looks really good. Like I think that looks really good from you know, for how it looks. It looks like it's a stone wall or a stone pillar, but we know the reality is just a cube with very you know, with literally only 6 faces. It's a cube that's been stretched, a polygon with 6 faces. So really low poly. And you can get away with a lot by doing this. All right, so this is the first part of your lab 2. Let us save everything now. File, save project, and let's create that GitHub project properly. So I'm going to close this off now. And what I'm going to do, I have some fixing to do because I copied and pasted. So I'm going to go to Command, and I'm going to go to the right folder. So that's on my desktop, just to fix the problem. I had a problem like this earlier too. So I'm just going to go right into that lab 2 as an example. And what I want to do is I want to get remote remove origin so that when I do that, I'm not pointing at the same remote. Otherwise, it'll point to the same GitHub repo. We don't want that. And what I want to do is make a new GitHub repo up here. So I'm going to go to George Brown College, make a new GitHub repo called Lab 2A, and this will be final. So we have a starter, and this will be final. So again, it's going to be called GAME3004, Winter 2021, and then Lab 2 Final. Lab 2 Final. And I'm going to grab the last 3 lines of code here, and I'm going to paste it inside of my command prompt. And that should connect me again back up to the same thing. You can use, again, for you can use what we did last time, which is Gitkraken. Cool. Let's refresh and see what this is. So there's the lab 2 final. Let's also change the README file, but we'll do it online. So I go online and I change the README file. So it says lab 2 final. And here it'll be lab 2 for GAME3004. This will change the README file up online. And then what I'll have to do is pull in my command prompt. So git pull, which will pull down everything from my GitHub repo. So now I'm in sync. Now I'm in sync. And let's pull up that project again up on with Unity Hub. Okay, so that's part 1. Part 1 is, can I get my pillar into Unity? Does it look good? I think it looks pretty good. You know, I think you can do a lot to improve the look and feel of all your stuff, just like this. Notice that it took time for us to create this, and that's why I've asked you to split off or to specialize your teams into, you know, again, specialized roles. Someone who is a technical artist that's also a programmer, But as an example, their prime focus is, outside of programming is getting assets, making sure they look right. Maybe you need to texture them or modify them and bring them in. Okay. Sometimes that doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, in Russ's case with his procedurally generated world, it may not make any sense to, to texture everything like this by hand. But there will be some things, maybe if you have items or something else that you acquire that don't have a texture wrapped around them, then you can bring them in. The other good thing about what we did today was get you guys to understand the process, which is the most important piece. What's the process? What do artists go through one way or the other to create a model, to texture the model, to apply different normal maps and so on? And how do I bring all those textures into Unity, and what kind of a material do I create? So that's what we kind of did here. All right, next steps. So we've done, let's go back to our PowerPoint for a second. And if we look at our lab requirements, we did materials in Blender, UV mapping, we downloaded textures, we did texturing 3D objects in Blender. Now we're going to do this part, which is we're going to build for Webgl and deploy to GitHub pages. Okay, so this is the next part. So when building to Webgl, one thing to note is that we need to adjust some settings. Webgl uses OpenGLES as opposed to OpenGL as we know it normally. So let's do this one step at a time. So again, I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Build Settings. And under Build Settings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my open scene. Here we go. Here's an open scene that's been added. And what I want to do here is I want to change it to WebGL. So I'm going to select WebGL as a platform target, and then click Switch Platform. So it's going to take some time to do this, but what it does is it takes some of the textures and it changes the quality settings for your project so that it targets WebGL. It re-imports your textures, your audio, and everything else for the platform, just like we did for Android last semester. Now I want to go into player settings. After I've switched platforms, I want to go into player settings. And again, if you're lagging behind me just a little bit, that's okay. You're going to go into player settings, and you're going to go into company name and change your company name to something that makes sense for us, which is George Brown College. You can choose your own company name if you want. I'm going to do Lab 2, right? Version still is 0.1. We really haven't made much of advancement on this thing. Now let's go into resolution and presentation. By default, your WebGL build does a resolution that's 960 by 600. You can definitely change this to something bigger. For example, 1024 by 768. Let's make those changes. And I want to run in the background. There are two templates that are installed here by default. The default template as well as the minimal template. We want to use the default template here. We can also make our own templates, which we're not going to explore this semester, but you could make your own custom template as well. Other settings. If you scroll down, you can see that light map encoding is high quality, but we do have issues. API compatibility level is set right now to .NET Standard 2. We'll leave it there. And then if we scroll down, you're going to see a couple of other options. Again, I'm not changing pretty much anything right now, but under publishing settings, this is the one option you should change. Move it away from compression format from gzip, move it to disabled, please. We're not compressing it in any way. Please don't do that. Okay, so all I've done is I've changed this part in my resolution. I changed my resolution to 1024 by 768, larger resolution. I went into my publishing settings and changed my compression format from gzip to disabled. Now let's save the scene. Save the project. And what I want to do is I want to build and run. Just like we did last time, we're going to create a new builds folder. All right. And in the builds folder is where I'm going to have my build happen. So just like last time, let's wait as it converts everything to WebGL. And again, what it's going to do is it's using in Scriptum to take the C++ code that's been generated and the objects that are here inside of our project and convert them into WebAssembly. And there's going to be a data file that is runnable by JavaScript, right? That's what's going to happen. It's also going to create an index.html page that we can. Okay, so this is it's taking time. Sorry about that. Yeah, Russell says the same thing. It's using my GPU a lot, and because I'm using NVIDIA Broadcast, it's processing my voice in a funny way. And remember, I'm also doing a bunch of things all together. For example, I am on Zoom, I'm streaming on YouTube, I'm building this for you, I'm using NVIDIA Broadcast. I'm really taxing my system. No, I can't do more things. I can't. As you can see, it's taking a while. If you're watching the video, all right, and there you go. And you can see that it's crazy fast, too fast. It's like so sensitive. Why? Because we have our mouse sensitivity at 1,000. That's what we have. So running is okay, but mouse sensitivity is crazy. And also look at something else that you can see. Our shadows are terrible, right? Let's fix all those options right now. So again, I'm just going to exit out of here. And the way that worked just now is that Unity ran a little server on the background. Hopefully you guys can hear me and it's not chopped up anyway. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Michael. It's my crazy system. It's gonna come up in a second. Yours won't take much longer than mine. So we need to make some adjustments. So let's take some notes. One is I need to change my, under the player, let's go to the settings for the player. And notice that the mouse sensitivity, right? So that's in the player camera. The mouse sensitivity has been set to 1,000 because in our local view, which we're not using a release build, it's pretty slow. Let's change this to 100 for the web. Because on the web, it's using a release build, so it's going to be really fast. And the next thing we want to do is change our quality settings. So if I go to Edit, and if I look at Project Settings, it's going to bring up that screen that we saw last time. We see our player settings here, but I want to go to Quality Settings, Quality. Notice that by default, Webgl uses a high quality, right? So it's not very high or ultra, like I can get on PC and Mac, as an example. And notice even on iOS and Android, it's medium, okay? Well, we can see what that looks like. So right now, I'm looking at ultra settings. If I click here on high, you can see the differences. So pixel light count is 2, right? On ultra, pixel light count is 4. On high, if I scroll down, you can see that the shadow resolution is medium. On ultra, the shadow resolution is high resolution. Let's change our high to high resolution for shadows. Let's not change anything else, just that. Okay? We can play with these other settings later this semester. For now, and we will, but for now, this is all I want. Just change the shadow resolution to high. Michael, did yours finish building? Great. Okay, excellent. Let's save this. So save scene, close this off, save project, and let's rebuild. So file, build and run. And it shouldn't take long to build again because we're doing an incremental build, whereas before we were doing a full build.
How many times are we going to be rebuilding?
Just this once.
Just so I have an idea.
Just this once. It won't take long because the incremental build is, as you can see, much faster. And now you can see it's much smoother. It's much more reasonable when it comes to moving around. I can do the same kind of jumping and everything else that we had before.
So all we change the sensitivity and the one shade shadow setting.
Yeah, because see the shadow setting is a little better now. Not much, but a little, especially the ones that are farther out. I'm only using 2 cascades. We can also use additional cascades to make it even better. Okay. It's pretty good. All right, this is local, and I can also make it full screen if I want to. Full screen is actually much nicer. If you make it full screen, you can see what it looks like and how it performs. It performs fairly well. And we can also see how the texture will look. We go into a lighted area. Texture looks great on Webgl, no problems. It preserves pretty much everything that we saw on the Unity side. Okay. Let's close this off now and let's put this on GitHub. So first I'm going to go to Unity, save, and I'll talk about the for the submission, Russ, in a second. Give me one sec. So save, file, save project. And let's close everything down again. All right, cool. Let's use, this time I'll use, well, actually for me, I'm going to use, for my project, I'm just going to push it through command line. But for the other thing, I'm going to use gitkraken. So git dot git commit -m, and I'm going to say something like, you know, built for Webgl, git push, and that should push everything up to, this is for my project. It's going to push everything up. And also, I also added a pillar. I did a lot of things, right? So notice I'm actually pushing up about 15 megabytes or so, and that's really it. Now, we're not done. What I want to do is I want to use gitkraken. Let's use gitkraken. Or you can use command line, whatever you feel comfortable with. And what I want to do now is make the build. I want to make a build for my project. So I'm going to go to add a new tab, and I'm going to start a new local repo. And what I want to do here is I want to browse into where my folder is, GAME3004, but this time I want to go right into Lab 2B, where I was with you guys. And I want to stay in this level right here, where I can see the builds folder, and then click select folder. What I want is I want to open up a new repo in the builds folder. I don't want to add a gitignore file at all or anything else. Just click create repository. So why am I doing this? Because the build folder, what it did, and we'll look there in a second. Let's stage all changes. It has an index.html file, a WebAssembly file, and JavaScript files, right? And what we can do is we can serve this up on GitHub pages. So to answer your question, Russ, no need for itch.io at all. You can put this right up on GitHub pages for free. So here I'm going to say added build files, commit changes to 15 files. Yep, I know. But you can see how fast this is going to be. And it also does incremental builds similar to what itch does as well. So I kind of added this folder locally, added build files, and I'm going to push this up on GitHub, just like we did before. So I'm going to select George Brown College, and instead of the repository named builds, I want to call it GAME3004 and the winter 2021 semester. And it's going to be called Lab 2 build. And
my GitHub isn't letting me create the repository there because it's already a Git repository.
Shouldn't be if you have a Gitignore file. If not, you know what you could do, Michael? Take that builds folder and either move it or copy it into another folder and make it there. Make a whole brand new folder if you want. Doesn't really matter because this is what you have to push, this part right here. So if we do it properly, and if I click create remote, create remote and push local refs here in Gitkraken, then what it will do is it'll push it up to GitHub. And if I go to GitHub now and take a look, I have this build, lab2 build. I'm going to take this lab2 build, right? Yes. Nice cat. But you need actually this part right here, this build part, you're going to need to do, you and your team are going to have to do this, cat, for your midterm checkpoint, right? So that's why I'm showing you how to do it now so that you know how to do it for your checkpoint. So everything I'm doing, I'm actually getting you to do it. Okay. And you can look at the video later on to make sure this is done right. So again, I made a lab2 build folder, and I'm just going to save this one on up on Blackboard for you guys so you can compare my build folder to yours. So again, I'm going to go here and go new content, web link, and lab. So GAME3004, winter 2021. Actually, we'll just call it lab2 build folder. All right, so you can see what that looks like. Now, this is not, the build folder is not your final folder. This build folder, what it's for, right, is just an intermediate step. So labs2 starter, lab2 build folder. And now what I want to do is, do you want the project repo and the build folder? No, I want the project repo and the live site, which I'm going to make right now. So the live site comes out of your build folder. All right. So let me show you how that's done. So in your build folder that's up online, you must have an index.html exposed on the root of your folder. Okay. You must have this here. If you don't have this here, you'll never be able to do the next step. Okay. That means that the only thing that's inside of your lab2 build, there's no Unity files, just your build subfolder, your template data, a README file, and an index.html. That's it. So if I go to settings here in this folder and I scroll down, there's an area that says GitHub pages. And it's literally just a couple of clicks from here. Go to none, where it says none, select your main branch, and click save. Now it's going to take its time to build and deploy this thing live on the web. So let's take a look and see when that happens. I'm going to go back up on GitHub. And the way to check this is if I have a check mark. So in my commits, if I see a check mark that's in my commits, it means it's been deployed. Sometimes I'll get an X if I don't have something right. Like, for example, if I don't have an index.html here. If I scroll on the right, you can see that there's something called environments, and it shows you an environment on the right, GitHub pages. And now if I go click on that and go to view deployment, this is the link that you want. This is my live site on GitHub pages. And I'm going to give you this link right now so you can check it. You should be able to run this live in from here. So check it out. You should be able to run this too. Okay, so the great thing is you can run it in full screen mode. It runs like butter for me. No problem, right? Nice and easy. And it should run just like this for you. So that's the link that I need. I need this link. This is the link that I want for your live site, right? It's not your build folder, but rather the name of your repository.github.io / your repo name, and that is the live site. So if I take this whole thing, copy it, and I go to Blackboard, I can make a new web link and I can say this is lab to live site. And it's always going to be live as long as I leave it up. And by the way, this has been used for lots of little reasons. You can make your own website. I use GitHub Pages for everything from creating portfolio pages for students to projects that use node modules. One thing it doesn't do for you is it cannot serve up a database, but it can connect to a database that's been hosted somewhere else. So that's pretty cool. So you can actually run a whole interactive site right on GitHub Pages for free. And the GitHub Pages, of course, are owned by Microsoft. So it's pretty cool. I think it runs on AWS in the back end, meanwhile.
So once we had it on GitHub, how did we make it
live?
Deploy?
Yeah, so you go to your builds. This is where you would have it if you were here. And then you're going to go to settings, and you're going to go scroll down where it says GitHub Pages. There's going to be an option here for none, but you're going to choose main. And once you've chosen main, you're going to click save. And this will generate the deployment. And what I want you guys to do, if you follow along, is you should, basically copy paste your live site inside chat, and I'll try your stuff out and see if I can play your game right now. And I'll actually put it up on YouTube right now. If you've done it.
Saying it's ready to be published, do I have to do anything else?
No, you just gotta wait. So what I would do now is I would go to the actual code and see if you've got a check mark here, and if you have an environment that looks like over here on the right hand side. You should see an environment link.
Yeah. And then I do it, and then I get 404. There's a GitHub page here.
You gotta wait. So Daniel says, can we just create the index.html from scratch? Not really. Well, you could, but you need to, it won't really point to anything. So if you want to see what index.html is, this thing, it actually, it loads a lot of different things. And what it also does is it connects to the WebAssembly script that runs in a web worker on the back end. So, again, I don't recommend you do things from scratch. You can certainly modify this file, the index.html file. You can modify it. So if you want to prettify it, you want to add menus, you want to make the background black, you want to do all those kind of things, you can still modify it. It's just an index.html file. Daniel, you do it through Unity. I didn't make this. It was generated by the Webgl build, right? So you wouldn't generate it from scratch. You do it from Unity. So if you've watched carefully, in Unity, when I do a WebGL build, it generated the index.html. Yes, it creates it with the build. The WebGL build creates an index.html. And everything else you need here. Okay, if you watch the video later, it'll go through it. So does anyone else have a live build they can try? They can show me that have been successful? Nate or maybe Russ? Hey, there's Michael. Let's try Michael's out.
It's not working, though.
Well, let's see. Oh, I see why. Okay, so this is yours. That's your build. So I see that it's been deployed. Here it is. It's been deployed, Michael. If I go to here, that is where it's been deployed, and this is it. This is your thing. This is you.
Then which one was I trying to deploy?
I don't know, but this is yours. I'm running your thing right now, so it works great. Right?
Okay.
So this is the link right here. This link right here is yours, Michael. Let's paste it back to you. This is the link. So notice it's not GitHub the GitHub page itself. It's not the build page, but it's the deployment page on the right. This page. Click on GitHub Pages here on the right. This is yours that I'm looking at, right? So if it was yours, you click on the environments on the right, you click on GitHub Pages, and there's a view deployment link. That's what you want.
I would click that, but it would take me to 404.
Sometimes it's just caching. Your your Chrome browser is caching, and that's why it wasn't ready yet, but it's ready for me.
Okay.
Okay. How about anyone else? Russ or Nate or Daniel or Kevin? Anybody? We can try yours out as well. Okay. Maybe you want to give me your link like Michael did, and then I might be able to see it. So your link would be the build, right? Yeah, so it's the same thing for you. You're choosing the wrong thing. So this one is, again, you don't see this little check mark here? Yeah, you got it. That's the one. So if you go to the little check mark, and if you go to details, then this is the 404. So yours is not quite ready, or there's a problem with your deployment. I'm not sure if it's your index.html that's caused it or something else, but there's definitely a problem with your deployment, even because I'm getting 404 as well. See? So something is missing in your link here. And it could be the way you deployed. Sometimes you need to do it again, Kevin. It's not always perfect. Remember, it's a free service, but it does a lot of the stuff for you. So you may have to try it again. And again, it won't work unless the build was successful. If you built it successfully and through Unity, then it should work here. And make sure it's not compressed, because compression also plays a factor. All right, so that is really your the stuff that you need for your lab 2. So lab 2, what you need to do is on the Blender side. I'm just going to bring up Blender one more time. So I'll show you the screenshots I'm looking for in Blender. So in Blender, let's look at the pillar. So this is the last thing we had. So you probably want to take a screenshot of either like this, right? Or you can, what might be better for you is under your shading tab, something that looks like, this, which basically shows everything kind of like this. This might be a good screenshot for Blender. So take a screenshot here. You can also, some people have taken screenshots of this. This is fine too, that, kind of you've shown this. Maybe a couple screenshots here. It won't take much to do, right? So that's what you need on the Blender side. One of those or two of those, okay? The other thing you need in Unity, if I was going to take some screenshots in Unity, this is from just to complete what you need for Lab 2. Let's bring back Unity. From a screenshot perspective, you probably want to show the pillar in Unity by itself without running in Webgl, something that maybe is like this. So you can show the pillar, you can show the hierarchy. This kind of screenshot might be okay, right? And maybe a third one would be the Webgl build, which is, kind of running on live, if you can. So that would be, if I was going to see the deployment, it'd be this one, right? Where maybe you want to do a kind of a full screen deployment, or even something that looks like this. So I can see that it says Unity Webgl build, something like that, looks like that. Right, that might be a few good screenshots to show. For what you need to submit, a link to your GitHub repo and maybe the link to your deployment, and that's it. So fairly straightforward. I don't recommend that you need anything else other than that. I don't need a video or anything like that. Just like normal. A few screenshots, 2 or 3 screenshots with a couple of links. I don't care about the link to the build. I care about the link to the deployment, to the live site. That's what I care about, because then I can actually check it and see if it's working. Okay, and that's really it for Lab 2 requirements. The next video that I'm going to do, I'm going to stick around and continue. You don't have to, but I want to give you some extra stuff, to add in here. So I'm probably going to start in about 10 minutes. I'm going to take a short break after this, take 10 minutes, and then start recording. And I'm going to add things like your mini map. I'm going to talk about how to do that one more time. I'm going to start with an inventory system and build an inventory and an item class and all those kind of things I'm going to do. And this will start in about 10 minutes or closer to 5 anyway. All right, so that's it for me. Again, just things that we covered today. We covered materials in Blender, UV mapping in Blender, downloaded textures, different kinds. We did a WebGL build, and we deployed to GitHub pages. Those are the things that those are the core work that I want you guys to do for Lab 2. Any questions around the stuff that we did today? And hopefully you guys, you know, some of other people here also were able to deploy. Did you get a chance to finish it off, Nate or Russ? Because I know you guys were following earlier.
Kevin, I'm getting the 404 on yours as well when I try it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's not quite ready yet. So it's either that or something went wrong.
I tried opening mine in a different browser as well, and I still had issues. I don't know how you were able to open it.
How? You mean you still get a 404 on your end?
Yeah, I closed down all my Chrome. I opened up on Edge to see if it would work there.
Edge is terrible. Don't use that. Don't use Edge. Let's see if I can still, you know, this is yours, Michael. Look.
It's so weird.
It even says it right here. Right, but Kevin's I can't do. Kevin, if I go to Kevin's and if I click on Kevin's, then I get this. I'm not sure why.
F5. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Yeah, that's it for me. I'm going to stop recording this one on YouTube, but otherwise, for the people that are here, thank you so much for attending. I appreciate everyone that's here. Kat, thank you so much for being here as well, and as well as Blair and Daniel and everyone that was attending today. And otherwise, I'll stop recording on YouTube, and then anyone else has a question here, we can chat as I move into the next little video that I'm going to do for you guys as an extra. All right, for the people who are watching online, thank you so much. Good luck on your first playable build, which is due on Sunday. And please don't forget to put in your weekly report as well as your peer review, which is due Sunday. Thank you so much for the people that are watching online and even for the people that are here. And I'll see you guys next week.